The Unlovely Truth discusses what happens at the intersection of faith and true crime, so some of our topics may be difficult for young or sensitive listeners. Please use discretion. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of true crime podcasts out there. So you've probably wondered, as I sometimes still do, why I felt the need to start one. As corny as this may sound, I just wanted to help people. I love reading books, especially true crime ones, so I thought that a natural fit for me would be reading even more amazing true crime books and sharing some of my thoughts about them with my listeners. I thought that maybe as a private investigator, I could help people learn about more than just the crimes themselves. A very wise friend told me that I needed to market to a niche, a small, specific audience, to make my podcast stand out among all the noise in the true crime world. She encouraged me to use what was most important to me, my faith, and make that my vehicle to tell these stories. I'm so happy and so grateful that she did, because the people I've met along the way have taught me some incredible things. Welcome to episode 52 of The Unlovely Truth. It's hard for me to believe that it's been an entire year since I recorded my first podcast and put it out there all alone in podcast land. I worried over it like it was my child. What if no one liked it? But all of you who have listened have been absolutely amazing. You've been faithful, and you've shared the podcast with friends and made it grow. It's not for me that the growth matters, but for the people you're helping me serve, and you're serving them too. That's been the biggest lesson from year one, that what you and I are doing together is really a type of Christian service. As believers, we're called to bear one another's burdens, and the people left to deal with each tragedy, the survivors, are bearing the heaviest burdens indeed. I also learned that you can serve victims of true crime, whether you have experience or a background in criminal justice or not. Seriously, anyone with the desire to help can serve these families. I know that because I didn't have the experience I thought I needed when I started this journey. Ever since I was little, I've loved to read, and with every story, I wanted to know why. Why did the people in the stories do what they did? As I got older, I also started to wonder why the people in the stories I read didn't seem to recognize danger when sometimes it was looking them right in the face. Like me, you've seen the interviews of people whose neighbors turn out to be serial killers, and they all say things like, "He was such a nice guy, but we did wonder why cats from the neighborhood would disappear after we saw him with them." My fellow private investigators and I call that a clue. I want to take just a few seconds to thank you again and to ask a small favor. If this podcast has touched you at all, please share it and encourage others to give it a listen. Or give me a 5-star rating on iTunes, along with a short review. Helping the podcast grow means that more people can share their stories, and you encourage others to be of service to victims and their families. I can't do it without you. Now let's get back to the podcast. Long before I started with the line of work I'm in now, like a lot of you, I mostly worked whatever jobs fit my kids' schedules. I stayed busy volunteering at church and sometimes with ministries out in my community. But when my girls got older and became more independent, I was finally able to pursue something that I was really interested in. I went back to school to become a paralegal. One of my first jobs was a short stint in my local domestic violence court, which left me with a lot of interesting stories and got me asking why again. Why did the things I was seeing happen over and over again? But for the majority of my career, I worked in the corporate world. It was comfortable, with nice people, and it did pay well. But I didn't get to ask why very often. I was no longer collecting fascinating stories. Then one day when I was watching the news, I saw a story about 3 men being sentenced for the kidnapping and murder of a young college student. I was instantly hooked because I remembered that case from years before, and it had hit me hard. That young woman had been about the same age as my oldest daughter was at the time, and they even looked a bit alike. I wondered how I would cope if that had been my daughter. The news story featured a private investigator hired by the family when the local and state police hadn't been able to solve the case. But she did. And I suddenly thought, wow, maybe I could serve a family like that in some small way. So I contacted her and I asked if I could help do something simple, like organizing files or returning calls for her. I was willing to do whatever she needed just so I could be a part of this. And even though I was totally in over my head, somehow she said yes. Now, several years later, here I am. That call changed my life completely. I went on to get my private investigator's license, and I'm doing a podcast that fuses my interest in the true crime world with my faith. The true crime stories that I used to be so fascinated with are now the stories that I get to share with you. And as amazing as it is to get to do that every week, my greatest blessing from my work has been meeting such incredible people. I've spoken with survivors themselves, other investigators and content creators who have the same interests that I do, as well as moms and dads who have suffered the greatest loss a parent will ever suffer. And I've gotten to talk with some of you. And that's why we're going to have an increased focus next year in Season 2 on showcasing ways that anyone can step in and be of service to people in the true crime world. It can be a dark and messy world, and we need to work together to shine some light into it. If we call ourselves followers of Christ, then we're called to bear the burdens of other people. I'm still so amazed at all the opportunities there are to do this in a field that I totally love. The more I do, the more I want to do. When I first started, I tried to look for tools that would help shape what I was doing from a faith perspective, and I just really couldn't find any. It made me wonder if maybe that's why more Christians aren't serving in the true crime world. It's not typically the type of ministry that a church would offer, and we certainly don't bring it up in our small groups because we don't want to be labeled as that weird true crime obsessed lady. But there are so many opportunities and tons of great nonprofits out there. I just don't think that everyone knows about them. So I decided that I wanted to provide you with the tools I didn't have. In addition to sharing tips on the podcast itself, I'll soon be releasing my free ebook, True Crime in the Bible, Christian Service with a Twist, and other resources as well. Keep listening and follow me on social media to know how you can get these resources. The Unlovely Truth is written and produced by me, Lori Morrison. Music is by Neocortex, and artwork is by Shelby Highland. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you all in 2021. See you next time.